Welcome to Chat with Nat, Conversations That Count, the podcast where real conversations meet real life. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, an entrepreneur, financial professional, caregiver, and advocate for living fully. This show dives into the stories and strategies that shape who we are and how we thrive. Have you ever wondered why you keep attracting the same kind of partner, or why certain people trigger you more than others? The answer might be hiding in something you learned long before you could even talk. Today, we're diving into the world of attachment theory, how it shapes your relationships, your parenting, even the way you handle money. My guest, Bev Mitelman, believes that radical honesty and understanding your attachment style can help you create more authentic connections, not just with others, but with yourself. Of course, before we jump into the intro in this episode, I have your money tip of the week, which is how you attach is how you spend. So here's that money tip. The way you feel about money often mirrors the way you attach in relationships. If you tend to cling to every dollar, you might be operating from fear or scarcity. If you spend impulsively, you might be chasing comfort or validation. Awareness is the first step. Notice your emotional triggers before your financial ones. Y'all, I am so excited about our guest today and having her expertise to talk on this topic, on these topics, as we dig into the conversation. But let me introduce you to Bev. She is an expert in attachment theory, focusing on romantic relationships, sexuality, respectful parenting, and attachment styles in the workplace. At 48, she's a mother of two sons who are away at college, and she's navigating her own season of change as an empty nester after having been married for 23 years and separating in 2020. Bev believes radical honesty is the key to real connection in a world that's growing increasingly disconnected. Bev, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you and your audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm excited to get into this topic because just as I was preparing for this episode, I was reading some of the information you sent. I hopped on your Podmatch profile and I was looking through some things and putting the notes together. And I was like, oh, I can recognize so many things from my life and the attachment to money, which is where that money tip just made perfect sense for today. So let's jump in first and talk about understanding attachment styles. So what are they and how do they impact our romantic relationships?
So excellent place to start. So when we're talking about attachment styles, we're really talking about our emotional connection or the way in which we form an emotional bond with someone else. And this is deeply rooted in what we learned, saw, felt, and experienced as a young child. So when we come into this world, we are wired for connection. Right?
Yeah.
And as young infants, as humans, that connection is critical for our survival. An infant will not survive without a connection to a caregiver. Right? So it's critical. And so we're wired for this connection, but the way in which we experience that connection sets up a set of patterns in our mind for how it is we're going to interact with the world, how we're going to view ourselves, how we're going to establish emotional bonds with other people. So when we're talking about attachment styles, we're talking about learned behavior. And there are four distinct categories that we as humans will form an emotional bond with other people. So those styles, we're talking about those four different ways.
Okay. Interesting. But makes perfect sense. So far makes perfect sense. So, okay. So as we go through childhood, how does that form or develop our attachment style?
Yeah, great question. So on a baseline, we start by talking about a child who develops into an adult who has a secure attachment. This is sort of what we're aiming for, the utopia, the best case scenario. This is a child who experienced a fair degree of emotional attunement from their caregiver, right? So they got consistent, predictable love Those keywords: consistent, it was predictable,
Mm,
there was emotional attunement, and they felt safe, emotionally safe. So that doesn't mean that, they got everything they wanted as a child or the parent was perfect, because there's no such thing. But the child could relax into the relationship knowing that
mm,
if they had an emotion, they were angry, they were sad, they were joyful, they felt shame about something, that their caregiver would teach them what that was. They would honor that. They would learn what it was, and they could express it to their
mm.
caregiver and expect that the caregiver would respond in a healthy way. So that sets up that individual to move into adulthood where they've got a level of emotional intelligence and attunement towards their self. They learn communication, they learn emotional regulation, they learn about the importance of boundaries, and all of this good stuff that's needed to have healthy relationships as adults for your romantic partners, with family, with friends, with coworkers, with everyone around.
So, okay, so that makes me think, is there an age range where this development happens for the most part? And like, I'll use myself as an example. I became a single mom at 5.5 to my son. And I was in dating relationships after that, never lived with anybody or got remarried. And the first relationship I had after my marriage ended was not it it was not an abusive relationship. It was kind of an emotionally manipulating one for
Mm-hmm.
me. And I think that I can look back now and see ways that I shut down my son's emotions and things like that, likely from a place of just being so caught up in what I was dealing with. But
Mm-hmm.
but then I asked the question about, so what is the age range that develops? And then can it shift while they're still in the home? Because I think the one thing I tell people all the time, I know for a fact I got right as a mom, because I can name a million things I didn't, is especially through my son's middle school and high school years, I always told him, you can tell me anything. Good, bad, indifferent, you can always talk to me about anything. And to this day, we have an amazing relationship. I'm the first
And he
phone call he
does.
makes.
He comes and he tells you.
Yes. Oh, even when he was in the Marine Corps serving 6,500 miles away from home, I was the first phone call he would make whenever anything was happening.
Mm.
And so I know I got that part right, but that's where that question for me comes from, on what's the age range that happens. And as we grow as better parents and adults, do we have the ability to maybe impact for the better some of the things maybe we got wrong in the beginning?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. I'm also a mom. I have two sons. They're away at college now. The original patterning happens really, really young, from
Mm,
0 to 5.
okay.
But then, of course, as life takes its course, we have lots of experiences, right? And so when we talk about your attachment style, that original style sort of really does form in those earliest years, but then it can shift a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. It's a continuum. It's not a fixed state. And the reason I say this is because attachment styles, as I mentioned before, are learned behavior. So
Mm,
as we mature, we experience new things, we discover new things about ourselves and the world around us. Our behavior adapts, it evolves, it changes, we learn. And so, can you change your attachment style? 100%.
yeah.
Absolutely. You can do this in many different ways. Um, it sounds like the relationship that you have today with your son is very exemplary of the fact that you gave him plenty of space to have that emotional attunement with him, right? And that he could talk to you about things, and that you have an established level of trust with him, and that he can predict, for the most part, that you're going to respond in a certain healthy way.
Hmm.
Because I can tell you, if he didn't have that level of safety, he wouldn't reach out to you the way that he does as an adult.
Oh, thank you. He and I've had those conversations before where I'm like, hey, look, if you ever feel like you need to go to counseling or anything, his dad lived 1,200 miles away growing up. And look, I can tell people all day long, I never went without growing up, but I know there were still things that happened in my life, both in my home and
Yeah.
outside of my home, that impacted me. And I'm a
Yeah.
believer in therapy. I am an absolute
Yeah.
believer in it. So I'm like, look, if you ever need to go and there are things with me that come up, those are things you can come to me with too. If you're
Yeah.
learning that, yeah, if
I've
you're
encouraged my
learning,
kids to go to therapy too.
yeah,
Talk about it, learn to understand your mind a little bit better. It's only going to benefit you.
yeah. And I'm like, look, even if you go there and some things come up about me and you're working your way through that and you ever want to talk to me about it, like you can. I've
Mhm.
gone to therapy and I've had those conversations, those hard conversations with people and things before too. And he says, well, I mean, yeah, maybe at some point I would want to do that. And he's like, but mom, you slayed it. Now, I still think he could go to therapy and probably figure out there's some impact from the times I didn't slay that maybe have carried into different areas of his life and stuff. But it's always awesome to be able to have that conversation with your kid and hear that they
Yeah.
feel like you got it right. Because Bev, as moms, when we look back, I can identify 24 things in 60 seconds areas that I think I failed or
Yeah.
could have been better, right? So
Mhm.
anyway,
Which
but
your son may or may not even remember.
absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely,
I think it's beautiful that you give him that latitude to say, hey, whatever you want to talk about. I've had a similar conversation with my son, my older one who's 21. And I've said, I know there were moments that I wish I could have done something different, or
mm,
if there was something I could have done when I was younger or when you were younger, what change would you have liked to have seen? And I remember his response to me was thoughtful. And he said
mm,
to me, Mom, I think you just tried too hard.
mm,
And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he said, I remember you spending 3 days to bake me a 3-layer birthday cake when you could have just gone and bought something from the grocery store, but you had to make it perfect and you had to. And he said, I already knew you loved me.
mm,
And I was like, oh my God, he's so right. I could have spent that time with him instead of making this perfect. So why was I doing it?
yeah. So then that
Right?
comes back to us, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
I
So
love that.
I'm gonna step back a little bit because we started talking about the secure child.
Yeah.
And then I did mention that there's 3 other categories.
Yeah.
The other 3 categories actually fall in the insecure person. Right? So the person who has an insecure attachment style, right?
Okay.
So now we're gonna kind of flip gears and talk about the child who wasn't so lucky to develop inside of the home that was stable,
Yeah.
or they got emotional attunement, or where they felt emotionally safe. And as a response, they developed a whole set of maladaptations to deal with the scenario that was in front of them. And we're talking about homes, and it could be so many different variations where there was a parent, for example, that was suffering with mental illness
Mm,
or an addiction, or it was a very high conflict home, right? Lots of screaming, lots of yelling, lots of arguing. It could be a home where the parents were very stoic. There's we don't show emotions, or a
mm,
home where there's lots of children in the home and there just wasn't enough time and energy for everyone. Like there's so many different scenarios whereby a child can feel they're not getting the emotional attunement that
right.
they need. It's not always that the parent purposely tried to harm the child, but there is an impact to what the child receives and what the child doesn't receive from the parent.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
if they didn't receive that emotional attunement in moments that they really needed it, that leaves an impact. And so there's really a couple of ways that children will deal with it. There's primarily two. The first is that the child will, on the scale of insecure attachment styles, they'll develop what we call an anxious preoccupied style. This is what we
Mm,
call the anxious attacher. This
Okay.
is generally someone who grows up to chase romantically partners who are emotionally unavailable. They're always
Mm.
chasing after love. They very much crave closeness. They often feel sad and lonely. They're very focused on what other people think about them. They're very, very congenial. They're often the group of people pleasers. They just want to be liked and loved.
Mm.
These patterns, these maladaptations, right? These behaviors
Yeah.
come from the fact that they didn't have consistent love. They got a little bit of love in childhood and they knew that felt good, but it
Mm-hmm.
was never consistent. And so it created this pattern where they were chasing after that connection, right? That they knew felt good. And
Yeah.
so, your intro, you said, why do you always choose the wrong partners? This is a very common scenario where someone chases after another individual who is emotionally unavailable. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason we do this is because subconsciously it mimics the dynamic that we once had with our caregiver, right? So we think that this is our definition of love. This is what love feels like. I'm going to feel anxious. I'm going to chase. I'm going to sort of um, focus my energy and attention on the other person. And make sure that they're taken care of so that when they feel good, then I can feel good.
Yeah.
So we see this often in homes, again, where the love and emotional attunement was inconsistent, or the child's needs were really not placed on any level of priority. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, the child was parentified, meaning they had to assume roles within the household to benefit the parent or to help run the household. Maybe the parent themselves was emotionally immature.
Mm.
And so, we often see this in some toxic family dynamics where there's one member of the family who sort of consumes all the oxygen
Yeah.
in the house. And everyone tiptoes around this person. Don't upset them, right? And everyone else's needs fall to the wayside. And so the young child learns the way that I stay safe, meaning I don't get yelled at, I don't get criticized, I don't get punished, whatever the safety looks like is I give.
Mm.
I make sure the other person is okay. I give of myself. Now, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be giving, but often what they're doing is they're giving away so much of themselves. They don't understand their own needs. They often don't understand or know how to implement boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, And so it really becomes difficult when they become adults because they generally are the people who go to really extremes to be congenial at the expense of themselves. Now, if we peel back the onion a little bit, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say that I'm going to be so likable
Yeah.
that you will never leave me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I'm such a good friend. I'm the friend that will take you to the airport at 4 a.m. I'm the friend that if you need money, I'll give you money. I'm the friend that you need to talk for 2 hours. I'm there.
Yeah.
You could never leave me. I'm such a good friend.
Right.
Right. So the thinking here is that like the easiest way to get people to like you is to just say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So this cohort of people is generally very overextended.
Yeah.
So I don't. That's a pretty big description of what the anxious preoccupier anxious preoccupied attacher, what they look like. Is
Okay.
that? Do you have any people in your world that sort
Oh
of fit
yeah.
that description?
Oh yeah. And I can tell you the times in my life I fit that or that
Hmm.
I fit that description, and I know
Hmm.
exactly why. But part of that comes from where I said I'm a believer in counseling. I've gone several times
Hmm.
in my life. And I didn't know it as what you're describing it as, but as you're sitting there saying it, I'm like, mm-hmm, yep,
Hmm.
yep. And
Yeah.
and people I know as well. But yeah, I think I honestly think that one is a pretty maybe when you're not the person, I should say, it's pretty easy to recognize somebody that fits in that, somebody who doesn't have the boundaries, who's always saying yes, who's always accommodating, who's always, there. But I also know on the flip side of that, it can be overbearing in its own way and
It
smothering to the
can.
person that's receiving all that love, all that
Yes.
kindness, all that emptying my cup constantly over the top of your head,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So definitely, I've been her. I've been her.
Yeah. And who are they? You just made such a beautiful segue here. Who are they usually emptying their cup into? Who's the person, the recipient normally of all of their love and attention and affection?
Somebody that just takes and takes and takes, but
It's
doesn't give back.
usually right. It's
Yeah.
usually someone who's emotionally unavailable
Mm-hmm.
and more on the avoidant side. So
Yep.
we talk about these maladaptations in childhood for your behaviors. You have the anxious attacher and you have the avoidant attacher. So I'm going to talk about the avoidant attacher. And as luck would have it, it's not really luck. These two often date each other.
Yep.
Often.
I believe
Often.
that.
Yeah. So the avoidant person, the avoidant attacher, also didn't feel safe in childhood. Sometimes they had a very smothering mom, for example, who,
Mm.
everything was about her, and love didn't feel safe, comfortable. They felt controlled. That's a big one. They felt a
Yeah.
lot of control, criticized. They were often left alone a lot. Like we see examples of emotional neglect. And what the child learns is that no one's coming to save me.
Yep.
So it's me, myself, and I got to stand on my own 2 feet and I got to do everything myself. They develop a great deal of trust in themselves because, well, I'm going to handle it. I'll figure it out. But they're really distrustful of other people, because they couldn't trust their caregiver to
Yeah.
respond to them, even, in predictable moments. And so that person grows up to be an adult and they really struggle also in relationships because they've got certain, unspoken expectations. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'll take care of my emotional state and you'll take care of yours. And then we'll get together and we'll have fun together. But don't ask me to take care of your emotional state. Like, don't you do that yourself? Right. Like the
Yeah.
idea of co-regulation would be surprising, but it was never modeled for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
I know
so
those people too.
yeah. Yeah. And these are really, again, the avoidance, they are simply trying to keep themselves safe. They often get a bad rap, like they're mean in some way or secretive. They don't open up easily because they simply don't trust. And it is hard for them to be in relationships. They can change this, of course. Um, but we often see like the memes or the tropes on the internet of an anxious woman chasing after an avoidant man.
Yep.
I do have to mention that attachment styles are not gender based. So there are plenty of women who are avoidant and plenty of men that are anxious. I don't know why we pick up on that particular trope as being funnier than the rest. But what happens is when these two get together, it's oftentimes really, really explosive in the beginning, like because they meet each other's needs. The avoidant feels so seen and
Mm-hmm.
so cared for and so loved, and all the affection that they're not used to getting, right, from the anxious person.
Yeah.
And the anxious person is sort of in awe of the avoidant who seems to be very calm on the outside. They present very calm, who seems to have a really good command of their needs and their boundaries and all these things, the things that the anxious person doesn't have. But after they spend a couple of weeks together, they realize that their coping mechanisms are so different,
Mm-hmm.
that it often will tear them apart. When in conflict, the anxious person will always seek closeness,
Yep.
right? And the avoidant person will always try to take distance. And this is how they are trying to regulate their nervous system The anxious person has not learned how to soothe or self-soothe their own nervous system. They're reliant on external sources. Again, their focus has always been on other people.
Yeah.
And because the avoidant person spent most of their time alone, figuring stuff out alone, they need to be in solitude to emotionally regulate. So when I say that these patterns of what we experience, learned, saw, felt, all of this really young impacts how we deal with things later on, it significantly impacts our thoughts, our
Yeah.
communication, our coping strategies, all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think kind of listening to those descriptions, if you fall into one of those realms or you know somebody who is, you can recognize it from what you were just talking about. Because I will say this, and I don't, so I feel like I've been both. I've been the anxious. I was in an 8.5 year relationship where I was the anxious with an avoidant. And I think the only reason that we lasted that long is because I didn't rock the boat when my needs weren't met. And
did you even know what your needs were at that point? A lot of people don't even know. They're so used to focusing on everyone else that if you ask them, what did you need? Oftentimes they get a shoulder shrug. I don't even know what I need.
Yeah, I think maybe in the first few years, the thing is we got along really well. We had so much in common. We got along really well. And so I don't think it was until the last maybe 3 years of our relationship that the reality of what was happening really came to light. And also, we never, this wasn't one of my marriages. I've been married and divorced twice, but I've been single for, oh my gosh, 18, 19 years now. And so, we were never married. We didn't live together. And so I think that was part of it too. They went home to their place. So they got their time and their space. And I still had my son. And so I think there were other components in there that masked a lot of what was happening until the last maybe year and a half, 2 years of our relationship, where my son was older and a lot more independent. He was a senior in high school, and all of these things started showing up. I was also growing personally and becoming more independent, using my voice, which was the biggest problem of all.
Yeah.
So,
can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please do.
When all this happened and you started using your voice and sort of coming into yourself as a more mature version, how old were you at the time?
I was 40.
Early 40s?
Early to mid 40s.
Okay. So
yeah,
most women don't know this. They don't know this, but it's a new field of study. They're doing research on this. It's quite fascinating. And we talked a little bit before about this. It has to do actually with menopause, midlife, the transition towards menopause, perimenopause, and women in their early 40s to 45 learning to now find their voice. And it actually is very much connected to what's happening physiologically and biologically in our bodies as women, because when our estrogen starts to drop, it's like there's like a veil that's lifted. So estrogen is like a peacekeeper in the world. It keeps everything nice and calm. It lets things roll off your back. So things that never bothered you before, all of a sudden you had something to say about it. Your resilience to stress significantly decreases. So we see the most common time for women to either get divorces or end a long-term relationship, as you're describing, is in between that 40 to 50 year block.
Yeah.
And they know that it has to do now with also the radical changes in hormones, right? Because estrogen, it modulates estrogen and dopamine, norepinephrine. Like it does quite a few things in our body that they're just starting to discover now. And so it makes sense that as we move into midlife, we start to have a level of clarity that we didn't have before. And I hear the same story over and over and over of women were like around the age of 45.
Yep. That's right around 44 or 45. And then honestly, for the first time in my life, coming out of that relationship, I sat in it. I was always the person that just kept moving and shaking and stayed busy until things didn't hurt so much, or things didn't bother me so much, or things financially got a little bit easier. I just stayed busy, so I didn't have to sit in the emotions. And so for the first time in my life, I sat in that hot mess, Bev. I sat in it. I screamed. I yelled. I'm a woman of faith. I hollered at God. I'm like, you take it. I don't want to carry it. And I started working on me, though, at the same time. I'm like, you need to take this so I can work on me. And then let's meet back and figure out who am I? Where do I go from here? All of the things. This was 2018, late 2018, going into 2019. And then it was like my son's senior year. He graduates, he goes in the Marine Corps. And I started my business that spring as well, but I was still working full-time in corporate America at the time. And so it was really, my son graduated from boot camp. And so coming into 2020, I was like, okay, I'm really going to step into my business on more of a consistent part-time basis. I'm really going to keep growing as an individual.
Yeah.
Stayed single through this time. And then I decided, this is the direction I'm going. And COVID hit for the first time in my life. So I'm transitioning and being an empty nester. I am completely alone. And I fell in love with it. And that's why I say I can see tendencies of me on the other side. I am very comfortable alone. I'm very confident alone. And so I think there's other tendencies of the other side that now I think exist or have, right? I'm always a work in progress. I'm always trying to get better. And that's one thing I love about these conversations I get to have with people like you, is I'm like, maybe there's still some work I need to focus on there.
I mean, there's always work we need to focus on.
Yeah.
If I had, again, I don't know enough about the situation and your sort of thought patterns and whatnot, but it's very possible that you are securely attached predominantly, right? Nobody falls squarely into one box, right? So we talk about primary and secondary attachment styles. So it's very possible that you are, primarily securely attached, but in the face of dating someone who potentially was an avoidant, even someone who's securely attached will display anxious tendencies.
Okay.
Right? Because you'll still get triggered.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't, but it'll look a little bit different. I would have to understand how you would, for example, handle conflict, or some of your thought patterns around some of these things. But again, none of what you're sharing with me surprises me, especially when you talk about sort of midlife and you're like, I had to figure out who I am. Like, where's my focus going to be? This is a very, very common story. And I applaud women who take the time to just sit in it, right? Because when everyone talks about how you need to do the work. And I don't think anyone knows what that actually means.
That's true. I agree.
Yeah, like do the work. So the way I define it is sit in it, understand your emotions, and understand how your body's communicating to you. So in those times that you knew you were really going through it, where were you feeling it in your body? Because your body talks to you, and we're so good at ignoring that. And then the next step from there is reliving certain circumstances, situations, and realizing, hold on a minute, I'm going to pause and I'm going to take a different route.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something differently here, which is going to feel terribly uncomfortable for the first couple of times, because we all default back to what's familiar.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm much more on the avoidance side. And so if I'm uncomfortable, I leave a room.
Yeah.
I go, you know what? This is not for me. And I leave a room. My work was to say, you know what? I'm uncomfortable with the conversation, but I'm going to stay here. And I'm gonna push through that.
Yeah.
Hard as hell.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so much more to that I think would add a lot of. We'll have to have another conversation at some point, and maybe dig in a little bit, because I'm always still about the work and the growth and wanting to be the best version of myself, and who I need to be at any given time will shift too based on what's happening in life, right? And all of those things. So it is a constant work in progress. And I think I knew that for a lot longer than I actually took action on it. But I was like, look, my life is shifting. I'm about to be an empty nester. I've just started all of these things, and I'm like, I've got to figure me out.
Yes.
I've got to know who I am. And at the core, I know who I am, but she is still navigating through all the things, right? Based on life and circumstances and whatever else could be, which I think is a great segue into talking about breaking the cycle, right?
Mm.
So we did kind of mention that your attachment style can change,
Yeah.
for sure. And so how does that move, or what does that move from anxious or avoidant power patterns to secure attachment look like?
So what's interesting is that, like I mentioned, we have these patterns in our minds. They're subconscious, which means we are unaware of them. It's
Right.
kind of like a computer program running like an old version of DOS. You remember
Mhm.
DOS from the 80s
Oh
and
yeah.
90s? Disk operating system for your younger viewers. And it hasn't been upgraded, right? But it's still controlling everything that's happening in today's world, right?
Yeah.
Now, we the same way in which we patterned these, or etch these patterns into our mind is the same way that we can create new patterns. The brain, our mind, is incredibly malleable. So there's
Hmm.
this level of neuroplasticity in our mind where we can create new pathways for new thought patterns, right? And the less we use the old pathways and the old coping techniques, they atrophy over time, which is precisely the same thing would happen in any other part of our body. So, for example, if I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle, I'm going to have to make a level of commitment and go to the gym and have an action plan and change some certain things. I can also decide to make changes to my thought patterns in my mind if I have an action plan and I have a commitment and I put in the amount of time. Like, people come to me and they expect, change after one session. That's not going to happen. You don't go to the gym once and all of a sudden you've put on, 5 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
But where you put your effort strategically, you can make beautiful gains in your body, physically, and in your mind. So, what do? We repattern, we rewire some of these thought patterns, which people believe to be true,
Hmm.
but 90% of the time they're not. You simply believe them to be true. It doesn't mean they're actually true. Right? As humans, we're so good at telling ourselves stories.
Yes, we
So
are.
good. Yeah, so good. So we do have special ways in which we can rewire, certain pathways in the brain. And then again, it has to do with identifying your actual needs, right?
Yeah.
So the traits of someone who is securely attached is someone who understands their needs very well, who communicates in a way to honor their needs, who understands their boundaries and can hold their boundaries. So for a lot of people, they don't understand what a boundary is, or
Hmm.
what are my needs, right?
Yeah.
What actually fuels me, what actually makes me feel good, what makes me feel safe, right?
Mm.
What do I need in this moment to feel relaxed? What are my needs, right?
Yep.
And so once we can help people work through the process of getting to know themselves a little bit, they're in such a beautiful position to then reconnect back to themselves. And we also do work in regards to emotional regulation, because people who are generally have an insecure attachment style generally have not learned the tools of emotional regulation because it wasn't modeled for them.
Yeah.
And so, when those emotions come up and you are overwhelmed, what do you do? Right? How do you handle it in that moment so that you don't allow your emotions to overtake your behavior, right? This is where we all do silly stuff, right? I'm feeling so emotional, so you pick up the phone and you call your ex-boyfriend, which is the worst thing to do, right? Like,
Yes, it is.
Right. Or, so
Yeah.
you do silly things, or, you go to the freezer and you have a pint of ice cream, or you go gamble, or you use drugs, or we do all sorts of things as humans to try to numb our
Yeah.
emotions. But what if we didn't have to do that? What if we learned that, okay, emotions are really only 90 seconds on average?
Mm.
90 seconds. And so, like you said, you sat in it. It's uncomfortable, but sit in it, acknowledge it, learn from it, and then allow yourself to move on.
Yeah. I
So
love
this is
that.
what we talk about. Yeah, this is what we do to bring someone into what we call secure attachment. It's a lot of work in regards to connecting back to yourself.
Yeah. Well, and then like that's a very healthy process, or a healthy place to be through a difficult and winding process, I should say. Because for me, I sat in it, but that didn't mean it was easy. That didn't mean I didn't have
Oh,
to face demons, some of my own, some of
yeah.
other people's, that I didn't have to do the work to realize, oh, these things are tied way back to this, or whatever the case may be, to get to clear the room in a
Yeah.
sense. So then I could say, okay, well, then who am I? And who do
Mm,
I want to be? And how do I want to find my way there? And so when you lead people through the process to get that secure attached relationship with themselves, then how can that set the foundation for healthier relationships with others? And how does that show up with others? Obviously, we've talked a lot about relationships and parenthood today, but even in the workplace.
yeah. So, the people who are securely attached generally, again, has the big benefit here, of course, is that they have learned skills around emotional regulation. So they're not the ones that are volatile, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not the ones who are creating the drama, right? So if something happens in the workplace, something happens in the family, they're usually able to apply a level of rationality to it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of dramatizing something, making up stories, creating a bigger situation that it is, you need those emotionally stable people in the world, who are calm and rational, and beyond that, if we're going into the romantic realm, if you're truly looking for a partner, you have to know yourself. When you're sitting
Mm.
across from a table with someone and you're on a first, second, third date, you have to know, okay, what do I value? What's important to me? What do I need to feel healthy, safe, calm, all of those things? Because, we talk a lot, like in couples therapy, we talk a lot about, oh, we need to work on communication. I often find it's not the communication, it's that the people don't understand what they actually need. They don't know what to say. So,
Mm.
when your partner says, what do you want me to do in this moment? Like almost out of frustration, oftentimes they'll go, I don't know, I'm just upset. Not because they're trying to be a poor communicator. They actually don't know what they need to feel calm. So they don't have an appropriate response to give
Yeah.
because they don't know themselves.
Mm.
Right. So even when I went through this process myself, I was married a long time and then separated, and I went through, this work myself too. And I needed to do the exercises. And when I finally started dating again, I was quite clear with the people that I was on dates with, I value honesty,
Hmm.
I value loyalty, and independence. And you'll get that from me, and I'll give it to you. But I really, what's most important to me is that is the honesty piece. So if I feel that people are being dishonest with me, that makes me feel unsafe right away.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I communicated that, right? And I remember my current partner now, he said to me, I had never heard anyone say that before. And I was like, and I said, but it was true. And he said, we've been together a year now. And he said, a year later, I know it was exactly as advertised. You
Hmm.
cannot lie to you. Like, but that is because you have to know
Yep.
yourself that well to say, this is what I value. This is what makes me feel safe.
Yeah. Well, my current partner, on our very first date, I walked up and said, all right, throw it all on the table. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, all those red flags and skeletons in your
Mm,
closet. I said, I am about to turn 50 years old. I don't have
mm,
time for games. Like, put it all out there, because I'm telling you, I've got my own baggage and I'll toss it
mm,
on the table. We're not deep diving, but we're going to throw them on the table so we can both say that's a line in the sand for me and exit stage left. Or we can
mhm.
decide, okay, I want to understand this person more. I want to, right? I want to
Yeah,
navigate these
yeah,
things. And so over the next couple of months, we did deep dive into all the different things, where things come from for us. And I think, I've told my son, man, I would, if that would be my recommendation for young people starting to date, is
mm.
ask all those questions, because they're
Yes.
going to help you recognize. Because look, when you're on this date and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the most handsome man I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh, he's got his shit together. He has a good job. He drives a nice car. He comes from a good family. Whatever the things are that we are in the infatuation stage, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
if you can interrupt that long enough to say, like, tell me who you really are, and they could feel confident saying, I'm going to put it out there with the expectation that you do the same. And we're either going to save ourselves a lot of time and heartache, or we're going to agree to walk down this path together and set a foundation for really hard communication, which is what builds really strong foundations in relationships, right?
Yeah.
It's a game changer. And
Yeah,
so,
I
yeah.
love that. You were putting it out there. You were saying I value, in-depth conversation,
Hmm.
honesty, truth seeking, learning together. You were giving him all sorts of clues about your personality in that first moment, your personality needs. And it's a great test of sorts, because if he wasn't looking to have an honest, authentic relationship, he would have said, you know what, I think you're a little too much for me.
Yeah.
That would have been that, right?
Yep. No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. So as we wind this down, I want to have you touch on really quickly that the parallels in how we are when it comes to our financial behavior, which can be a game changer in relationships, right? Either the healthy way we approach money, the unhealthy way we deal with money can have a huge impact on relationships and with ourselves and our own financial situation. So how do those your attachment style, those attachment wounds impact financial behavior?
So the values that we have around money often come from our childhood. Sometimes it's sometimes connected to attachment, sometimes not. So,
Okay.
if you heard a lot that your family was struggling and we don't have money, we can't afford this, you're likely going to grow up with a much more frugal sort of attitude, right?
Yeah.
But where it does connect back to attachment would have to be with trust
Mm.
and potentially addictive behavior. So sort of like two different things. So first of all, trust. The amount of trust that you afford yourself, right?
Hmm.
Someone who's anxious, preoccupied often doesn't afford themselves very much trust, but they trust everyone else. So I
Okay.
had, for example, a client who did not think that she was capable of buying a car on her own. It was a big expense.
Mm.
She was afraid to spend the money. She felt that she needed to involve her husband or some friends because she didn't have any confidence that she could make the right decision. What she was actually telling me is that she was afraid that if by chance the car turned out to be a lemon, that
Mm.
she wouldn't be able to handle the shame around choosing the wrong one,
Mm.
which it happens to all of us. We all make
Yeah.
mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But that's what she was trying to avoid. So, especially when it's a larger purchase,
Hmm.
right? There's fears that come up related back to, am I enough? Am I intelligent enough? Like, can I do this on my own? I need someone else. So, that is very connected back to your attachment.
Okay.
Yeah.
In-
Now, also, we know that there's a number of addictive behaviors that people use to either numb out or to
mm.
sort of quash feelings that might feel too big. So,
Right.
and money plays a big part in this too, right? So a lot of these behaviors in terms of, for example, gambling is a massive um, issue
Mm-hmm.
or addictive behavior that we see most often with avoidance. Uh, Shopaholics. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've experienced this too. It feels good to spend money, right?
Yep.
If something is weighing heavily on you, sometimes people use that as a way to numb out their emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we see patterns that are associated to expenditure of money as well when people are feeling emotionally vulnerable. I'm sure you've seen this many
Oh
times.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I've been there too. I could
Mhm.
tell you there are specific times when it was easy for me to spend, but it was a
Mhm.
coping mechanism when
Yes,
I
it
was
was.
maybe going through a difficult time. And then there were other times that I was overly frugal um out of fear,
Mhm.
and like you said, in some way, shape, or form, it was a type of shame that it was fear of feeling guilty that I spent it, fear of feeling like, oh, what if, because things have been tight,
Mhm.
financially, mid-career for me was really rough, and so things have been very tight. I'm a parent. If I spend this, even though it may have been a qualified thing to spend on. It wasn't some big splurge or crazy thing. But what if then I'm short on grocery money next month, or I'm
Mhm.
short on? So I think I navigated in and out of both of those situations for several
Yeah,
years. And I think that's pretty common.
it
Working
is.
with people through, working with people when it comes to their finances, I see a lot of that in who they are right now, but also as we dig in and we start doing the work, creating what it is they want in the future, we start mapping out that plan, um,
Mhm.
and build that relationship. Then more of those conversations happen about either why they were such a good saver and they're in a good position, but almost to their own detriment. They don't allow themselves to invest or things like that to build more wealth, or exactly opposite way around. You're spending like $2,800 a month eating out, or going and just having fun with friends, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're concerned about being able to save for retirement. Then that's the complete other extreme, right? So
Yeah.
definitely see both sides of that.
Yeah, and what's interesting again is that people who are securely attached generally don't operate in extremes. We see this emotional volatility and extremes in any form of behavior. Spending money is one of them. When we're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with people who have an insecure attachment, because there's a lot more emotional volatility there, right? So the fears are greater, or the shame wounds are greater, or they're afraid of, like, whatever anxiety or shame that they're feeling is amplified.
Mm,
So that it's very common that we see this in that cohort of people. You don't see this exaggerated behavior too often in people who are generally securely attached.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, there are times now I look at it and I'm like, you know what? I don't need that. But
Hmm.
it's something I've wanted for a long time. I'm in a position where it's not going to negatively impact anything. It's not going to shortcut anything. I'm getting it.
Right.
I'm getting it.
And
And then
that's
there's,
reasonable, right? It's rational.
Mhm.
You're like, I
Yeah,
have enough money. I don't need it, but I've waited for it. Okay, I can afford it. Okay, I'm buying it. That's very rational.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side too, I'm like, well, I could, but you know what? I really want to bump up my savings just the next level, or I would really rather go on a vacation, with my son, this next summer or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to put the money there, because if I've lived without it for this long, I can continue living without what ABC, whatever it is,
Exactly.
right? So it's definitely, and I think that comes from the work I've done in my own financial
Mhm.
plan, which is what led me into my business and what I do today. And so again, it comes
Exactly.
back to doing the work and going through those processes, recognizing those different situations when they happen. So,
Yeah, and what's important to you? I'll end with a funny story. Everyone that knows me knows that I drive kind of a beat up car. She's a little older. She has a nickname. She's a bit of a senior citizen, but like we get along great, and she gets me everywhere where I need to go. I don't have issues with her.
Yeah.
But people say, why don't you get a nicer car? And I go, but she's just fine. Well, it would
Hmm.
be nice for you. Who would it be nice for? Because I'm okay with her. Is it because you're telling me you would be more comfortable if I was in a flashier car? Like
Hmm.
that I need to present that I have this level of success by what, because I'm fine with the car. She gets
Yeah.
me where I need to go. And you realize people look at things very differently. Because for
Hmm.
someone else, they will at any cost drive a really fancy car so the world thinks that they're financially, doing great, because what other people think of them holds so much value towards them that
Yeah.
they'll make that sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right? So that goes back to, again, what's important to you. And if you're securely attached, truly, you're not concerned about what other people are thinking about you. That's really the anxious person.
Yeah, absolutely. Bev, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. We definitely need to connect offline here, because I think the money piece we just talked about, I think there's things I could learn there to better benefit my clients, and maybe where some of that's come, how to have those conversations with them. And, I mean, also maybe personally. So we'll definitely connect. But how can the listeners find you? How can they get more of your information?
Thank you so much. So we do have a website at securityloved.com. We're actually a group of practitioners that work in the relationship and attachment trauma space. So it's not just me. I have a whole group of
Love it.
people that I work with. We also have a YouTube channel. I've just started the channel, trying to get some educational material out there, because I think it's really helpful. So on YouTube, you can check out Securely Loved. And we are also on Instagram at securely_loved. And if people are interested in learning about their own attachment style, I have a free quiz on our website, which people love.
Yeah.
It's a 5-minute thing. It's free. You go to securityloved.com. There's a little quiz, and you answer a couple questions, and it'll give you a starting point, an idea of where you fall, whether you have a secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant, or the fourth category that we didn't really talk about, which is sort of a mix of the avoidance and the anxious. But it's a good place to start if attachment styles is new to you, and it's tells you a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. I think that's great. Thank you so much. So, listen, I've got today's hot take real quick. We think about our money problems or our relationship problems as separate things. But the truth is, there's a similar pattern showing up. It's just in a different outfit. So, if we can heal the attachment wounds underneath, the subconscious things that we're not even aware of, if we can do the work to navigate through those, we can start attracting peace instead of pressure in every area of our lives. So if today's episode sparked something in you, please don't just scroll past it. Sit with it. Share it with somebody. Reflect on where you might be acting from fear instead of security, whether that's in love, business, or your bank account. And if you're ready to build that secure attachment with your finances, you can contact me through the link in the show notes. If you'd like to look at ways that you can navigate getting to a healthier you and therefore impacting positively all your other relationships, reach out to Bev at securelyloved.com. Take her quiz and set up some time to have a conversation. She's got information that literally could change your life. Why not lean into that if you're looking for answers? Let's get you attached to abundance and not anxiety. If you'd like more of my content, you can also subscribe and follow me on Chat with Nat on Substack. And until next time, remember, focus on your 5 F's: faith, family, finances, fitness, and fun, because wealth starts within.